It's 4020, not live. I was going to show you my accreditation, but it's over there, so I'll have to show you it later. Because I'm allowed into Rugby League grounds again in 2021. Is a privilege, not a right. And judging by some people listening to this show, Phil, they think we're anti-RFL. They think we don't like anyone.
Well, we don't like anyone, do we? Clearly. Well, we're just hashtag negative rugby league.
Indeed. I should say that what Phil says is his opinion, what I say is my opinion, and what anyone else on this programme says is their opinion. But they don't necessarily cross. They may do, but they might not.
I think if you find criticism to be constructive, then it's perfectly within the sphere of... but I'm not sure we could be termed influencers in any way whatsoever. In fact, I wouldn't listen to anything I say ever, and there's plenty in my family who don't.
I spoke to a viewer at the weekend who said he misses the biscuits. So that's the only influence we have is biscuits.
That's the content. That's what everybody wants.
Content. At least we talk. Well, pretend to talk about something you know about, as opposed to other people. We've got big interviews coming up. Which we've recorded one of them when we do this now, and it's really good. We get lucky with guests, but we need to talk about the big news today, which is Leeds Rhinos have broken the bank. Everyone's injured at Leeds, but they're not in crisis. Hey, when we did Leeds in crisis, did anyone say to you at Leeds, "Oh, Phil, you're not allowed in now.
You can't come."
No.
Can I buy a T-shirt? You can't come.
They let us in eventually. Well, it's fun going. Kyle Eastman, he has left rugby union for the challenge of playing rugby league, which he played a decade ago. It's a body coming in at a very interesting time for the Rhinos because obviously they've got a lot of key men out.
I think in terms of media management, they've handled it really, really well. But they've known for a while clearly that Jack Walker's had a reoccurrence of his foot injury, and unfortunately for him, likely to mean him missing an entire season. Clearly, they've known that Rob Louis' injury is going to be maybe 2 to 3 months, and he's in the last year of his contract. And they've announced that on one day, and the following day, because they've had negotiations over, I think, a week, Kyle Eastman is in, and it's really interesting because there are so many. Your first thought when you go, Kyle Eastman playing for Leeds, been playing rugby union, and what are the links between getting him to Leeds? Well, there are actually 3. One is Richard Agar coached him when he was in the England academy team. He's from Oldham, and clearly is well known to a certain director of rugby who is also from Oldham. So their paths have crossed in not only on the field, but they've seen each other, grow up. And when that phone goes and it's Sir Kev and you're from Oldham, the likelihood is you're going to pick it up. And of course, the third one is Sean Long, who was a mentor to Eastman in his early St Helens days. He's in charge of the attack for Leeds, so Eastman is going to need some time to adjust, but clearly he's got a guy coaching him who he's going to be inherently in tune with. So actually it all makes sense, and I think I'd got the entire tongue-in-cheek comment about broken the bank. I actually don't think they have. I don't think they've had to, because as Eastman has said today in his unveiling, he felt that this was the right time to come back. So I think he's come back for reasons other than necessarily finance. He could have gone to France to continue playing rugby union. There's all the issues around travel and quarantine and what that actually means, and I think he's found a home. It works for both parties. I think a 2-year deal means that we may well be coming to the end of the Rob Louis time at Leeds, because his contract was up at the end of this season, and I think he's going to have to fight to get his place when he comes back from his injury anyway. And I think the other thing that's interesting is that clearly the rules have changed while Eastman's been away. And the one thing he had when he was at the peak of his rugby league game first time round was incredible speed off the mark. Now, clearly he's 10 years older, and maybe that speed has decreased a little bit, but what he will have is more space to operate in. So it could be a blessing in disguise that they've had to find a solution to a problem that wasn't originally on their radar, and because of the connections of the 3 guys to intended number 33 in the shirts, then it could be a win-win for everybody. I think from the wider rugby league perspective, the national media cottoned on to the fact that here's a returning guy who's played for last England game I think was against the All Blacks in Auckland. So the story is, tempted back to rugby league, and it's down to him to make that transition again and establish himself in a Super League team. But it's raised a few eyebrows, and that can only be good for the start of the season.
And in terms of expectations on him, he's if I put Luther Burrell at this end of the scale and Sonny Bill Williams at this end of the scale, he's somewhere in the middle, probably towards the Burrell end, because Sonny Bill Williams were all expected to come in and score 1 million tries and not knock on with his first touch in Super League. But Eastman, there's going to be some expectations on him, but not as much as Sonny Bill Williams say.
But I think he can deal with them because rugby league is his first choice game. So, he's only going back to what he knows. Clearly, there's an issue about how fit do you need to be when you've spent 9.5 years in rugby union, because it is different. I think he said that predominantly he played most of his union career in the centre, and there was less hands on the ball and more bulking up a little bit to be prepared to get caught at the bottom of a ruck with a 16-stone forward on top of you. So I think he'll enjoy the fact that he can, to coin a phrase of somebody who has lit up this show, and he'll enjoy himself. He'll have vision and awareness. He'll be given the opportunity to play. And I think a lot of people would be interested in seeing how he does cope and how he does adapt. And yes, it's a story for Leeds, but I think he's Luther Burrell came very late, never really got the opportunity. Sonny Bill is a natural athlete in 2 or 3 different sports. He could adapt to anything. I think Kyle Eastman's coming home is something a little bit different, and actually it may well be a little bit of stardust that Leeds need to close the gap on the teams that were above them last year.
I mean, Leeds' first game of the season, of course, is away at Wakefield at the home of Rugby League, the Mobile Rocket Headingley Stadium. I was checking because you mentioned 16-stone forwards. I was going to see how much David Fafita weighs, but I've Googled him, and it comes up with the other David Fafita. And when you click on people also search for, it's a lot of NRL people I've never heard of. He's not on there, which is a bit disappointing. I'm searching for David Fafita, and I can't find David Fafita.
I'm sure that Penrith Panthers bound David Fafita, no, he isn't, is turned up in svelte condition for pre-season training.
Well, the other Dave is 16 stone, 12 pounds. Well, he's also 6'1", so there's too many David Fafitas around. We're going to throw into our first interview because we've got the second one coming up, and the person's in the waiting room. This is exciting, Phil, because we're talking about the London Skolars, which is a club we don't often talk about, and we can say now, because we've already recorded the first bit, a brilliant 30-odd minutes with Jermaine Coleman, which is well worth your time.
I think it's on a number of levels, and there's a lot to take out of it. One is, where is the game going in London, and what could the sport do more to promote and help the game in London, and clearly there is a talent pool there that we're missing out on. There are promotional opportunities linked to World Cups that we've got to start making now rather than on the afternoon of the game itself. And I think the other half of the interview is Jamaica based, and clearly the issue around diversity. What does it actually mean? It's all right saying you're going to do something, but what have we not done, and what lessons do we need to learn from that? And how can Jamaica act as a conduit to bring a whole new audience into the sport? Absolutely fascinating subjects, and he speaks so well on all of them.
He does. I can't tell you how well CEO Colin Browne speaks, so we haven't spoken to him yet, but you'll see him after we speak to Jermaine, and then we'll be back to talk about some more rugby league. Jermaine, thanks for joining us this afternoon on Forty20 TV. First of all, how are you, and how are the London Skolars ahead of the 2021 season?
Yeah, I'm well, thank you very much. Scholars, probably like every other club, are finding things as difficult and as challenging as everyone. As I said, we're back in training now, which is good. This month we're back to 2 sessions a week, which is nice, so we can get a little bit of contact in there. Obviously, clubs of our status and other clubs possibly in League One are the issue that we're going to have is the volunteers or the finances behind putting all the measures in place and tracking and tracing and getting all the testing done. I hate to say it's worse for us than others, but potentially it is in London in terms of the boys sort of travelling across and not having the clubhouse to go in and stuff. And it takes them an hour or two to get across the training, and if they've got to wait for the test, they're then sort of sitting around from 5:30, 6 o'clock until training starts at 7 o'clock. So, yeah, I think things are difficult and challenging, but as I said, it's a situation that everyone's finding themselves in, and it's very new for everyone. So everyone's trying the best to be as successful as possible.
Yeah, we're trying to get back to normality, of course, but 2021, much like 2020, it's going to be another difficult year on and off the field in rugby league.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as you said, last year was a massive write-off in terms of rugby and where we're at and what we're doing. It probably gave the club a little bit of time to settle in and bed in, and with the changes that obviously happened with Hector and Terry leaving, and gave the other directors an opportunity to kind of get their feet under the table and get things ticking over and understand how things work and the extra responsibilities that they took on. And I guess, for myself and probably for the players, it just gave everyone a chance to reset. So, like all players, they're probably playing with niggles. So having that year off has probably done them the world of good of sort of resting them niggles. But the downside is how much they actually managed to train and how fit they managed to keep themselves in that off time. So, we'll see. And the fact that we're starting now gives us a nice run up for the start of the season in May. So we've got plenty of time to put things in place and get structures in place and get people back up to scratch and where they want to be. And I think the fact that they've had a year off, everyone's raring to go, and he's more than happy to do anything you ask them to do at the moment. Whereas I think in a normal pre-season, they're still carrying their niggles from last year, and they're a little bit reluctant to do some of the stuff you ask them to do.
I guess this will be a two-pronged interview, partly about what's happening with the Skolars and looking forward to your role with Jamaica, because that must be incredibly exciting. Just sticking with the club side to start with, seems to be a difference in some of the coaches that we've seen interviewed recently about how they tread with their players having not had them for so long. There are some saying, early injuries in training because they're not used to it, we've got to ease them in gradually. Others are saying, actually, they should be all the better for the rest that they've had. How will you approach it? Are you going to take it easy on them to start with, or are you going to flog them?
A bit of both, really. I think having not come out of play myself too long ago, I think I probably have a little bit of a different perspective to possibly some of the other coaches that are in the league. And I guess I'm a bit more mindful of what it's like as a player and the mindset that you're going through when you come in and you're just going to get flogged. So I don't really like my sessions to be out and out flogging. There's not a lot of running. I think this year is probably the most I've ever run them, and I think I've asked them to do 2K once. I speak to my brother, obviously signed at Hunter, and he's been asked to do 5Ks and 10Ks every week, and it's not my philosophy. It's not how I like the sport to be played. I don't think you need to have that type of engine. I think there's a lot more sort of stop-start stuff involved, and that's how we approach things. So there's a lot more sort of game elements and skill involved in our sessions, and a little bit of psychology of you're playing games, you're not getting flogged, but you are getting flogged at the same time. So yeah, I guess my mindset really going in is that they've had that time off and everyone should be coming back in a condition that they're able to train to their fullest. The only bit that I would say I've probably eased off on is the contact. Obviously, we'll start contact this week for the first time. That's probably the one area that we are going to ease back into, because, as I said, that over enthusiasm will definitely get the better of some people, and someone will definitely end up on the wrong end of an injury when they don't need to be there. So that bit I will definitely ease them back in. But the rugby bit is the rugby bit. They've come back in, and it's very much how most of my pre-seasons have been. There's a real element on focus on skill and structure and understanding, and the fitness you get with playing and you get with running around. And I guess the expectation now at this level is that you're not going to get everything you need from your 2 or 3 sessions a week. You are going to have to go away and do your own thing. So a bit of the onus and responsibility is on them to come in to training in a condition to be able to train, as opposed to coming into training and me getting them up to that condition to train. And that's more of the focus that we go with.
2019 was an interesting season for you as well. You started off top of the league for a while, and almost surprised everybody, possibly even yourselves, I don't know. And then obviously settled back a little bit down a bit later in the season. But it was an encouraging platform to build on. And you had a lot of young players in 2019 as well. Was the plan 2020 to go a bit more experienced and build on that?
No, to be honest with you, I don't think 2020 or 2021 is going to be very different. I think, as you said, we set ourselves a really good platform there. And I think what probably hit us quite hard, up until that halfway point of the season, as you said, we were sat top of the league. We lost 4 players, essentially. We lost the 4 lads that we had on loan all season from Wigan. who made a significant impact. One of them was a fullback who, Joe Browne had scored sort of 7 or 8 tries in 7 or 8 games. We lost a halfback. We lost obviously Craig Mullen, who had been playing in the centre for us. And I think it had quite an impact on our team, because all of a sudden you're replacing three really key players. You're not, with all the respect to positions, you're not replacing just a winger. You're replacing a fullback who plays such an important role. And then when you're trying to fit someone back into that role, you're changing how your structure of your team is playing and how your halfbacks adjust and where the ball's going, and all the 1%ers that people talk about change significantly, and that has a real impact. I guess if you compare it to a Liverpool as we're going now, they've lost one defender. They haven't changed the way they're playing, but the impact on their team has been significant. And I guess that's where we were at. And I think, as you said, we had a real big dip, and then the last, I think, 6 games of the season, we lost by an accumulative of 13 points. So we kind of got back into that. Okay, we know where we're at now, and we're getting our feet back under the table. So that's what we was probably looking to do in 2020, was to go with that same sort of team. We didn't lose anyone. We didn't necessarily pick up any players, but we didn't lose anyone. So we were going to build on that back half of the season. And obviously, unfortunately, it all went up there. Went wrong. Trying to think of a nice word without swearing. It all went wrong. So yeah, this year is a similar sort of tact. We've got a similar squad. Again, we've got a couple of new guys coming in from London. I think the big thing I've been focusing on the last couple of years is making sure we're developing that London talent, and we're giving a platform and an opportunity for those players that don't make it at Broncos and within that academy system, reserve system, and make sure that they've got somewhere to go on and play. I think far too often in London Rugby League, they either excel and go to Broncos and then go somewhere else in Super League, or they don't quite make it at Broncos and they drop out the game. And I think there's been a real struggle probably the last 4 or 5 years to build that relationship with ourselves and Broncos, and to make sure that we're getting them players back and forth. And I think since Danny's been involved, and obviously Hendo just before him, and I've been involved, there's been quite a lot of back and forth in terms of players. We've had players with ourselves that have then gone on to full time with Broncos, and vice versa. We've had players from Broncos that have come and stepped in with us and done a really good job with us. So we're hoping that relationship can go from strength to strength, and we carry on developing players in London, and that can only be better for both squads and obviously for the sport itself.
Yeah, we've seen, as you mentioned, plenty of players from London now have made their mark on Super League, likes of Lou McCarthy, Scarsburg and Tony Clubb at Saints and Wigan respectively. And I guess it's an important area for the sport to grow in and find more of that talent.
Yeah, definitely. Again, as you said, there's a sprinkling across Super League, there's a sprinkling across Championship, and that gradually more and more the players from the south are going up there. As you said, you mentioned 2 or 3 players there. You've got Sargi, who did the same thing. Mike McMeekan's up there doing his thing. Kieran's now moved up to York. So there is players right across the league that are doing it, and I think it's the players down here are athletes, and they're very good athletes, and they're getting into the game a lot younger now. So they're able to push on, and I think that's a big thing. I know Danny's focused on it, and he's got a significant number of his squad now that are a bit London based and our young lads, and we're going down the same road, and it's important for the longevity of both our clubs that we do that. We develop our own, and we have players coming through the system, because otherwise we have that hardship all the time if we want to attract a player from the north, but they're earning X amount of money playing the game up there and X amount of money from working, and everything's nice and easy, and they come to London and everything's significantly more expensive, and they're earning probably a little bit less than what they were in the rugby, but they're expected to make it up in the job. And that's the problem we always have down here, in particular at Skolars. The boys make so much money at work that it's hard to justify giving up 2-3 hours an evening to come to rugby, when on the weekend they're picking up a little bit of match money, whereas if they stay at work on the weekend, they're picking up, £500-700 from doing the overtime. So that's always the battle that we have down here. And I know Danny has a similar situation when he's trying to house people. It's a significant chunk of their wages is going on their house. So they might have been earning the same money that they're earning up north, but it seems like less because it's all going on what they're paying in rent. So it's important that we keep developing our own players. And again, as you said, we're not only for ourselves, but providing for the teams up north as well.
You mentioned that obviously there's a closer link now with the Broncos and a talent pathway, if you like. What about the other end of that? We've seen a lot of schools, for example, playing in the Champion Schools programme from London and the South. A couple of them have even gone on and won the tournament. So that there is a reservoir at the bottom end of the pyramid, if you like. How can you attract those players when they leave school, maybe go to college, into your environment in Haringey?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of my biggest disappointments. When I first moved to London, I did the community role at the club, and we were having tournaments every weekend, and we were in sort of 30 odd schools, and we had on our register 400 or 500 kids, and we had an influx of players all the time. Our junior teams were full. Broncos had 6 or 7 development officers. Both of us had lots of players coming through the ranks, and that's when you picked up your Tony Clubs, your Sarges, your Lou McCarthy's. Unfortunately, and I hate to harp on, but the RFL for me have got to do more down here. We're expanding. It's the capital of the country, and we want to expand the sport. But we went from having 6 development officers in the south of London, and we had sort of 3 or 4 in the north of London, to 2 across the whole of London. So common sense says that if you're not going to pool your resources and put some money into it, you're going to miss out on a whole group of players. And unfortunately, that's where we're at the moment. There is a large chunk of players that have been lost to the game, and like you said, a large chunk of them school kids who would have come through and done really well and have been lost to the sport because we don't have the infrastructure either at our club or at Broncos to go and attract all of them and cater to everybody's needs. The London League down here is good. The players are good. They enjoy it. They want to play it. But as you said, then pathways are just not quite strong enough at the moment. And again, similar to ourselves, for them to play in a competition that's better and challenge themselves a little bit more, it's the cost of getting up north every weekend. And, unfortunately, again, they need the support. They need something to be put in place so that they can develop that competition, because otherwise it's only going to get to a certain point before it plateaus out and it's never going to get any better. So I think there's a whole lot of work that needs to go into it off the pitch and in the background, and there's a whole strategy that needs to be put in place. And at the moment, I'm not quite sure where that strategy is leading for London. I think they want to develop the sport, and I think at the moment their idea of developing the sport is to go to another country and bring another team in, as opposed to trying to develop and build a foundation here. But I guess that's down to the philosophy whoever's in charge at the RFL, and I'm sure 10 different people will have 10 different opinions on how you do it.
This may sound like a stupid question, but I'm trying to work it out in my mind. Do you think almost that we don't realise at times how big geographically and population-wise London is compared to, say, Manchester, Leeds, somewhere in the north? We just see it as like, oh, it's London.
Yeah, 100%. Again, it's just looking at the sort of the things that we have to put in place now about the COVID measures. And, we had a meeting the other week, and they said you're not allowed to use public transport and players are not allowed to travel together to get to training. And we were like, well, we're in London. That's what everyone uses. Everyone uses a tube. So how do we function? How do we fulfill that sort of criteria on that tick box list to make sure we're functioning? And, as you said, up north, obviously I'm from Leeds originally, but I spent time playing at Newcastle and at York. But it was always Newcastle a little bit different, but it was an hour drive. But to York, it was a 20-minute, 30-minute drive. And, if I wanted to go to Hunslet, I'm a 10-minute drive. If I want to get to Oldham, I'm a 40-minute drive. Here I live 7 miles away from the club, and it's a half an hour drive. So, the comparison is just not there. A lot of my players, because of Broncos and the way that rugby started, and because of all the development officers that they had initially in the south, a lot of my players live in the south of London and live sort of Twickenham and Ealing. In order for them to get to training for a 7 o'clock start, they're leaving at 4:30 and having to leave work early. The comparison is just, it's hard. What they're doing is a 2-hour trip to training to get here just to train, and then by the time they finish at sort of 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock to get back home, they're getting home at 11:30. That's a large chunk of the day that they're giving up and sacrificing. And as I said to you previously, when they're earning money, it's a big ask for them to do. And I think there's a lot more understanding I feel at our club, and in terms of how it is to be a semi-professional. Whereas again, up north, if I'm working for Peter down the road and I play for Hunslet, and I tell him I play for Hunslet, I'm getting off at whatever time I need to get off, and if that's 10 minutes before training, it's 10 minutes in the car, I'm at training, bang on time, and there's no problem. You just don't get the same kudos down here. So I think it is a lot harder for London Rugby League. But because of that, as you said, I think the sport needs to realise how big it is and how big the demographic is and how many people they can reach down here and all the different nationalities that they can reach down here. And there's a massive pool of talent that's untouched, and the commercial avenues that are down here are there to be touched. Obviously Wigan, we spend a lot of time playing against Wigan in the Capital Challenge, and they're realising, they're expanding their club and realising actually to do things properly and to get the money that they want to get, the right place to have their commercial team is based in London, because that's where all the money is. So it seems strange that one club can understand that, but the sport doesn't necessarily understand that.
I know the Broncos have been slightly nomadic. How important is it been for the Skolars to have that home base set up for you?
Yeah, I think it's been really good for us. As I said, I've been down here now 16, 17 years, and it's always been at New River. So the familiarity of being there, and as you said, some of the junior players coming there, everyone knows we're there, everyone knows what it's about. We have our own challenges with the council that we have to try and address and we have to try and sort out. But the facility has changed over them years, and we're now playing on a nice 4G pitch, which is ready to train on and play on in any weather that we need to play on and train on. So, things have developed, and having that home base and having that real sort of grounding of this is where London Skolars is based has been fantastic. I know there's been talk in the past about us moving and trying to find our own ground, and there was a lot of conversation this year about potentially Broncos coming in and joining us at New River. Unfortunately, that's not panned out. Otherwise, it'd have been fantastic. But I think there's a real opportunity again. As you said, Broncos have been all over. There's an opportunity for the Rugby League to maybe put his hand in his pocket and get involved at London Skolars and say, actually, let's make that the base of London Rugby League, and let's get, we've got a fantastic community around us where, players want to play. I think there's probably 5 or 6 players within my squad that are from the local area and have been brought up in the schools around there. And, there's a real sort of talent pool there that they can go and get. I mean, you guys probably won't know this, but the NFL have set up a home base at New River, and all of a sudden have sort of 300 players playing the game of American football, trying to get themselves an NFL contract, and it's all based out of New River because the NFL have identified the area and the demographic of the people around there and said, actually, we think we can get in there and go do something about it. And they're now in the secondary schools, and they're working in the secondary schools, running programs in the secondary schools, all about developing this NFL program. And as I said, they train out of New River on a daily basis, and they've got 300, 400, 500 people there on tryout days, and they have the NFL come over and get a celebrity, one of their superstars, to come over, and they're doing massive things in the area to promote American football, and it's paying dividends for them.
It's nice that you'll be able to cash in on the back of those athletes that don't make it in the NFL, and they're providing a ready-made talent pool for you.
They are, and it does work. Elias McCarney was exactly the same thing. I mean, I met Elias as a 15-year-old. We were training at Finsbury Park at the time, and he was playing in exactly the same thing. He was doing the NFL program and training with them, and we sort of saw him, picked him up, and he's gone on to play Super League, and obviously now he's back with Skolars as my assistant player coach as well. So there is a talent pool there. It does unearth some raw athletes, but again, we're missing out on a huge chunk, and it's about having the foundation there to be able to go and get them and drag them across to your sport and show them why Rugby League's a little bit better than what American football could be.
One of the guys who you have produced and is coming back with you, Lamont Bryan. I mean, that's important for the Skolars, but clearly for Jamaican ambitions as well. We can talk about Jamaica in a minute. How important is he? But also, all being well, we've got a World Cup semi-final on your doorstep at Arsenal. First time we played at their stadium. Can you capitalise on that?
I would love to think so. I know the board of directors were just speaking literally last week about the fact that the semi-finals in London, and I spoke with a couple of the league papers the other day, and we were talking about exactly that. What are we doing to celebrate that? What is the club doing to kind of to benefit from that? What is Rugby League doing as a sport to try and monopolise that and say we are we're in Arsenal Football Stadium playing a semi-final of the World Cup Rugby League in the heart of London. What we're doing, again, it's disappointing. I work in a secondary school just in the borough, and we're around the corner from Arsenal. And there's nothing at all to tell anyone there's a World Cup here, and there's nothing at all to tell everyone, the semi-final is going to be at Arsenal, and it's not mentioned in any of the schools. It's not doing anything at the moment. So yeah, it's really disappointing. But I think, again, we have an opportunity. The Scholars certainly have an opportunity to try and get something off the back of that, and try and whether that's a fan base that they can kind of attract to the club, or whether it's players, or whatever it is. We need to do something, and I think that's really important that we maximise that and we get something out of it.
In terms of Jamaica, I mean, clearly it's a massive opportunity. You talk about demographics and new audiences and attraction. You're playing in Leeds as well, which I know for you personally is massive, having grown up in the city. This is going to be your career highlight, isn't it?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. It's something that sometimes I think you have to take a step back and have a look at and kind of be thankful for where you're at. I think probably all people in sport get to that level and don't necessarily always take a step back to kind of think about what they've achieved and where they're at. And yeah, it's massive, as you said, for it to be in Leeds. And what we did obviously last time when we played England, we got the biggest crowd the Knights have ever had in terms, I think it was 7.5, just short of 8,000 people. And again, 40-50% of that must have been a new audience and new people to the game. So we're very much hoping as a sport that we can leave a legacy. It's not just about us attending this one World Cup and doing really well. It's about leaving that legacy. It's about leaving that foot sort of path and showing people where the sport can take them. Obviously, Jason's involved with us as well, and he speaks to us a lot about what Rugby League and what Rugby Union's given him and the opportunities that it's opened and the doors that it opens. And for myself, exactly the same. I've been to Russia, I've been to America, I've been all over playing rugby just because I play rugby. So to be able to sell that to the community and like you said, the new demographic of people, and show them that Rugby League is a valid option and a valid way to sort of live your life and can give you some fantastic opportunities is really important to us. And we spoke quite a lot in the Jamaica team as we feel there's a real shortage of players coming through, and we look back, I think a lot of the team is sort of mid 20s to sort of early 30s. And it's disappointing that, obviously Chev is there working with me, and Chev and I grew up playing together. I think he was a year below me, but we're essentially playing in the same team, the same city team. And yeah, we talk about the number of players that came through the game at the same time as us, and the number of mixed race players that were coming through the game at the same time as us. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be happening anymore. And, I think there's got to be questions. I had lots of questions, and I was quite vocal, towards the RFL about, we've come up with this plan about how we're going to move forward and Black Lives Matters and what we're going to do. But there's not really, for me, been any questions as to why we've gone so far away from what we've gone. Myself, Chev, Ryan Bailey, Dwayne Barker, Danny Mills, Matthew Whitaker. There was loads, and every team you looked at, Dale Cardozo, every team you looked at had lots and lots of mixed race players coming through at my age group. When I look through the sport now and I look at the academy systems coming through now, and it's, there's a sprinkling across the 3 or 4 sort of teams at the top, and that's it. And I think that's really disappointing. It's really worrying to see. Leeds in particular, they had an abundance of players, and unfortunately that stream of players is just not coming through anymore. There's no players from Chapeltown. There's not many players from the Hunslet area, and it's just really disappointing to see how we've had such a drop off in the last sort of 7, 8, 9 years. And I think the questions need to be asked of those people in charge as to why that's happened, rather than just trying to put something in place now to fix it. It's about why have we got to that point. You can't really fix it until you know what went wrong in the first place. And I think, unfortunately, they're not the questions that are being asked. There's lots of tick box exercises going on that we're going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to do this. But unfortunately, there's got to be some actions and there's got to be some responsibility taken for where we've got to in the first place.
And the other side of that coin, though, is that there is a responsibility on everybody who's involved in the Jamaican setup to make sure that's transferred back to the island as well. And we've seen Lebanon announced this week that they're definitely going to have 6 domestic players in their World Cup squad. Do you think you need to do something like that as well with the Reggae Warriors?
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, we've done that all the time, Phil. I mean, I think when we went to every competition I've been involved with Jamaica, we've done that. We've always had 4 or 5 of the island boys in. We've already set for the World Cup that we want to have 4 to 6 players in the team, in the squad. and there will always be a minimum of 2 players in the starting 17. So that's something we've kind of held ourselves to. I think if you look, the England Knights game, we had Kamisi who started in the starting 17, and we had Jensen who was on the bench. When we went over to America and qualified, again, we took 5 players over there in that squad. And I think in the final game, I think 2 of them played. I think Ronaldo and Kamisi both played, and I think we had Marvin on the bench. So we had 3 of the 17 in that team. So it's something that, as you said, is important. We're talking about that legacy. We're talking that ability to want to get behind the team and support the team. It has to have players from the island in there. And similar to myself, I think the plan is hopefully myself and Romeo that I'm going to get across to Jamaica this year. Hopefully spend a week in Jamaica with the team and then spend a week in America with them for the American Championships before we go back into the World Cup. And, obviously, as you said, impart some of my knowledge and give some of my experience over there, and hopefully help not just the players, but also the coaches that are over there as well.
What's Romeo like to work with? We had him on the show just after that night's game, an inspirational figure, and I imagine he's the same in the changing room as well.
Yeah, I think Romeo's more of an action person. He's not got massive words. He's, as you all know, he's very calm. He's very relaxed. He doesn't really get stressed about anything. He's very laid back in how he approaches things. To his credit, he's brilliant when he comes over here. He gives me my head. Obviously, I take things on as a lead coach, and obviously he gets to make decisions, and we go back and forth about things. And some things we agree on, some things we disagree on. But I think the nice thing about Romeo is it's always a conversation. It's never an argument. It's never something that turns into a shouting, slagging match. It's difficult to do that with someone who's so calm and relaxed. And yeah, I think his inspiration comes from the time that he's been within the organisation and how far the organisation has come forward, and the relentless number of hours that he puts in for very, very little in return, is inspirational. And I think there's not one person within the organisation that can question his commitment, his determination, his desire for us to be successful. And whether that's, I think he would be the first person to say that if the team and the organisation can be more successful than him, he would quite happily take a step aside if that was something that we all agreed with. But I don't think there's one person at the moment that would say that he doesn't need to be involved and he doesn't need to be leading it.
Looking at the group that you're in, there is a possibility you can make the quarterfinals. I'm sure that's the very least target you will have set yourselves. Give us the exclusive that you're going to be playing in it.
I think I've well gone past that now. No, I'd love to play it. It'd be amazing. Obviously, my 2 younger brothers have played in the last sort of couple of competitions that we played in when we went to America. Obviously, Jamel and Keenan played quite sort of prominent roles, and then obviously in the England Knights game, Keenan and Jamel both played again. I was fortunate enough when we played France, I think it's 2017, I got to play and represent Jamaica and play with them too, which was, it was an amazing feeling, and probably one that's only going to be topped, as you said, by coaching at the World Cup. So yeah, I would love to play, but yeah, I think unfortunately the World Cup probably came 4 or 5 knee operations too late for me.
What sort of warm-up games do you need, and what do you hope to have? I know every country's looking at a potential schedule. Possibly now you won't get a mid-season international because of the way the domestic season is going to have to be structured. But there is a window for you to maybe play at least 1, possibly 2 games before the tournament starts. So have you got some opposition in mind?
Yeah, well, as you said, I think, to be honest with you, I think we're fairly lucky. I think we're in a position where we obviously played the England Knights just a couple of years ago, so we got that fixture in. And I think if you look at most of the other international teams, they probably didn't play since the year before that. So in that respect, we're one up on them, and we got a little bit of time together within a group. We're really disappointed about the mid-season stuff. We had some really important things planned for mid-season, and we were going to hope to have sort of 2 tests, one with the Jamaican A team and one with sort of the first squad, so to speak, and give 30, 40 players an opportunity to put their hand up for the World Cup and put their hand up for a jersey and a place in that squad. We were then looking at having, again, as you said, another fixture just prior to the World Cup. But again, I don't know whether that's going to happen now or not. Obviously, things change. But that's something that Romeo and Alex are looking at. Myself and Chev and Ian Kirk, obviously, does all our strength conditioning. We will look at a program based on a best case scenario and a worst case scenario. So, hopefully we can get that game in, and there's no better substitute than playing a game against somebody and doing that. But if not, then we'll certainly get some sessions in where we're having some opposed sessions against, as I said, if we're based in Leeds, maybe it's against Hunslet, maybe it's against, some of the Rhinos team or someone. We'll get something in there, and we'll make sure that we're prepared. But I think, when you're talking about the group, yes, qualification is a target, and I'm sure it is for every other team in that group. I think, I don't think we'll be the only ones that are looking at the group going, oh, well, actually, we've got an opportunity to possibly beat that team and possibly beat that team and put in a good performance against that team. And, I think, the 2 games against Ireland and Lebanon are going to be massive for both Ireland and Lebanon and ourselves. So, everyone will be looking at trying to take points off each other there and then see how they go against New Zealand. I think the Irish team will be interesting. I think, a lot of our players will know each other. A lot of their players will know our players and probably play against each other. So, that might just come down to a little bit of a battle of wills and who gets it on the day. The Lebanon team, will be very interesting. It will be dependent on very much what NRL stars they can kind of coax into playing for them and what NRL stars they can't coax into playing for them. I think, if they're all of a sudden able to get a Mitchell Moses that sort of falls back on their toes, then, obviously they're going to be in a position where they're pretty thankful for that. But if he's playing fantastically well, then hopefully the green and gold might decide to pick him up and they'll lose out on him. So, yeah, I think that's probably the team that at the moment there's a little bit uncertainty about what they're going to bring in terms of their ability. But yeah, I think the Irish team, I think, we will all know each other. We will know how they play. Obviously, Tubbs and Jed are in there and Stuart Littler's involved. So, I would have coached against them quite a bit, and Chev will obviously know all of them players as well. So, yeah, I think that one's going to be nice. It's going to be a nice environment to be in. Jed and I played in the academy at Halifax, so it will be nice for us to kind of have a drink after and sit back and go, wow, we're both coaching in a World Cup. So yeah, that'll be a nice time.
Final one from me. Obviously, the World Cup's the light at the end of the tunnel, but we've got a domestic season before that. What are your hopes for the Skolars in 2021?
Yeah, again, similar. I think, for us this year, I feel the league is different. I feel it's a different league. I think normally, obviously, you're playing over a longer period of time. You're managing your squad a little bit better. You're getting people game time. I think the fact that there's been a year off, the fact that the season's going to be a little bit more intense. For me, we're going to probably go with a smaller squad and hopefully gain more competition. And I think it's going to be very much, that starting 17 is going to be hard to displace if he's playing well. And, I think we've got a really strong sort of 22, 23 man squad. And I think it can compete with any of the teams in the league. I think, like in other years, our biggest issue at London Skolars is going to be the ability for the players to play for 80 minutes. I don't doubt in any of our players that they've got the ability to play in this level. The thing that sets them apart from your Barrows or your Hunsuts or your Newcastles, and you see that in probably every one of our performances over the last 4 or 5 years, that for 60 minutes, if the game finished after 60 minutes, we can match any team and we could potentially be in it. But there's also been a 10-minute, 15-minute window when we're potentially the worst team in the world and we concede 3 or 4 points. So, for us, I don't doubt our ability. Our big thing this year is going to be about getting to play for 80 minutes. And if I can get them boys to concentrate for 80 minutes, then the result ultimately will take care of itself, because I think we've got the ability to beat any team on our day. But if we can't get those players to concentrate for 80 minutes, then I fear that we could probably be in for another typical Skolars season of 60, 70-minute performances and 10 minutes of disaster, which, it hasn't served us awful in the past. We haven't been getting beat like we used to be getting beat, but we ultimately, we want to win fixtures. We don't want to lose by 4 points and 2 points. We want to be turning them 4 and 2 points into 4 and 2 point wins. So, that's the focus for us this year. So I think it's another step in development. I think it's another milestones that we have to be looking at, whether that's number of victories, whether it's number of points that we score, number of points that we concede. I think that's probably more of a realistic target for us than setting that we want to be top of the league or we want to finish in this position. Actually, we want to focus on them small things. How many points we concede, how many points we score. The minimal things that people look at in terms of the stats, but for us are really important, because that will show us and demonstrate to us where we are in the game and where we are in the league. And ultimately, if we end up conceding more points than we score, we will end up being further down the league. On the flip side, if we score more than we concede, then we'll be further up the league. So that's where I like to kind of focus on, rather than setting ourselves a target. you know, we work on that on a monthly basis. How many points have we conceded? How many points have we scored? Are we plus or minus? And fingers crossed, if we're plus, we're up.
Well, hopefully Friday Night Lights will go ahead. We'll be in a position where people can come to games. Recommend everybody to go to the Skolars the night before the Challenge Cup final, if indeed we can have crowds, which hopefully we will do by then. But more importantly for me, I just wish you all the luck in the world with Jamaica. I know that the Skolars is the bread and butter, and we have to look after that. And you made some fantastic points about shoring up the pathway system, but the potential that Jamaica has got for establishing rugby league within the community, whether that be in Leeds or Birmingham or down in Harringay itself. This is something that rugby league has never had before. So I wish you all the luck in the world with that.
Thank you very much, and I think we're hoping to do, as I said, exactly the same thing. You know, we're not Tonga. We're not going to have the thousands and thousands of people that they did, but we want to come to the World Cup and bring exactly that. We want to bring some colour to the World Cup. We want to bring, you know, some excitement to the World Cup, some fun to the World Cup. And again, you know, I hark back to the England Knights game. We had obviously the steel pans in the crowd playing, and the atmosphere was fantastic. And you know, that's an atmosphere I haven't experienced before myself, although the crowd wasn't as big as maybe some of the crowds that we've been involved with before. The atmosphere and the pride and the sort of sense of belonging to the people that were there was massive for everyone in the group. And you know, I would happily say that I don't think there'd be another experience that any of us within that sort of match day squad or within that squad had experienced that before. And you know, that group, as you said, it's unbelievable being part of that team. There's something about it, and if I could bottle it up and get it into, like you say, the bread and butter of a Skolars team, they'd be unstoppable. But you know, the belief and the desire and the commitment and the sort of willingness to do anything for the badge is unbelievable. And it's not something I've experienced. And you know, I'm sure it's exactly the same in any other national team. But you know, if you could turn that into a general day team, would be unbelievable. And you know, hopefully, if Skolars give me a little bit more money, I can go sign a few more Jamaica players, and we'll have them as my domestic team.
Well, Jermaine, we wish you luck with the season, the money, and of course, you're a busy person in the real world. So thank you very much for taking up some of your time to speak to us, and hopefully we'll catch up with you again later in the season.
That'd be great stuff. Thank you very much.
Colin, thanks for joining us here on Forty20 TV. We asked Jermaine how things are going ahead of the season. How much are you looking forward to the team getting back on the field in 2021?
Oh, can't wait. It was a pleasure last night. I actually went down to watch them training. So it was a real pleasure just to see the guys with the ball back in their hands, you know, and yeah, can't wait until the 8th of May.
How was 2020 for you and the club? Obviously, not much rugby to watch, and a club still to keep afloat.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting year. Obviously, back in March, Hector McNeil and Terry Browne, who were the previous CEO and chairman, decided for personal reasons to take a step back. So, you know, that was the first challenge, was really to kind of, you know, start working with the new board. So Adrian Frayne, who was previously a director, became chairman, and I'd been doing some consultancy work as a non-exec operations director, if you like. So I took over the CEO role. So that was the first challenge, you know, getting to know the club a bit more and the personalities. And then obviously this whole pandemic just spiraled out of control, and it became increasingly difficult. You know, we had regular board meetings all the way through. You know, but sometimes it's difficult to find things to talk about. And then even then, you know, you're talking about things with no certainty, because what's true one week has changed by the time the next meeting 2 weeks later. So, you know, there's challenges. Obviously, keeping the club afloat was our main aim. And losing our two largest kind of investors was always going to be a massive challenge. But, you know, I think we're positive about the upcoming season. We've attracted some more minor investment, but you know, we're quite happy with how the sponsorship's going. So yeah, it's going to be a huge challenge, as I guess it is for all clubs in our division. But it's a challenge that I think we're all kind of looking forward to. You know, we we want obviously the club to continue, but we want to succeed as well. But I think importantly for us, I think we took a decision that we want the club to become more of a London club. Now, I know that sounds silly because we're called London Skolars. But, in the past, we've had a lot of players coming down from up north, from the heartland, if you like, to play. We want to really try and bring up homegrown talent. And we recognise that might take a while. We're fully expecting it to not happen overnight, but we do want to get to the point where we are representative of the players and the youth that's coming up in London.
I think it'd probably be remiss of us at this stage not to pay some kind of tribute to Hector, because anybody who's followed the fortunes of London Rugby League and the Skolars in particular and the game in the South would know that for the past 25, 26 years, he's been a very significant voice. He's always been opinionated. He's always wanted to promote the sport down there as best he can. How did you come across him? What are we going to miss? And what kind of impact do you think he's left?
We'll probably miss his voice because he's very... No, I mean, he's... Obviously, the club was his baby. And, he was instrumental, obviously, in getting the club up and running and keeping it afloat for the last 25 years, 20 years, It's and Terry as well, they've been involved for a long time. They've been major investors. And the legacy that they leave is more than just the financial investment. They're big personalities that are going to be hard to replace. But I think Adrian and myself have got plans, along with the rest of the board, of how we can, go forwards with the work that they've already started. And really, we want to kind of grow the game in London. And I think the legacy that Hector and Terry will leave is really that, hopefully we can make Skolars central to rugby league in London. And I'm not just talking about Broncos and ourselves. We'd like to get the community clubs involved and really kind of make New River or London Skolars a hub of all of that. Because I do believe that the game needs pushing in London. We don't seem to get a huge amount of consideration from the RFL. And in London, I think their priorities on the surface of it certainly seem to be elsewhere. I think we really have to put ourselves in a position where we ourselves work alongside the other clubs to really push the game. So I think really, Hector was the start of that for Skolars. Terry joined about 15 years ago, so he's been obviously a very big part of it as well. They'd be hugely missed, but they will still be, I'm sure, around the site and supporting the team in whatever way they can. We obviously have plans. We did have plans to kind of honour them with, official titles and what have you towards or last season, but obviously that's kind of fallen by the wayside at the moment. But as soon as we get the season going again, we want to celebrate our anniversary and also, the legacy that those two left us with.
And one of the biggest fixtures of your season is not even a league game, but clearly provides a lot of the financial support. I know it's something that Hector set up at the very beginning. The game with Wigan that's played in the middle of the city of London. You've lost, I think, the last two. I'm assuming you won't get one this year, and lost last year's. How important is it to keep or make those connections and again look for people who perhaps rugby league tends to ignore, which are the actual big hitters in the heart of the city of London at the Artillery Ground?
Yeah, no, it's vital that we continue that, and we certainly plan, if not this year, we certainly have plans for Capital Challenge 2022 at the HACs. So it is an extremely important event for us, not just financially, but also just to, as you say, increase awareness and visibility of the sport. So that's something that again, Hector has, said he will continue to help us with that, because we kind of run that in tandem with an event that he runs in the city at that time. So it gives us an opportunity to put ourselves in front of potential sponsors. So yeah, that's extremely important for us. I think what we'd like to do is maybe freshen the format up a little bit. How we do that, I don't know. We've got some plans that we're thinking about, but obviously the thing for us is to maintain that relationship with Wigan. Obviously that's really important, you know. And you know, we have spoken to them about the Capital Challenge, and you know, they obviously were completely understanding of the fact we weren't going to be able to run it this year. But if possible, we'll try and get some kind of event this year. But we'll see how the season pans out.
Absolutely ideal for a 4-team nines tournament, including another Super League team and the Broncos, and you can have that idea for absolutely free.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that we've been talking about. And also, I think what we'd like to also do is look at, as well as nines and with other teams, possibly looking at women's rugby and seeing if there's some kind of event we can get involved with that. Also disabled rugby. I'm not sure how that would necessarily work at HAC, but that's something that as a club, you know, we're kind of looking at, especially in the World Cup year. You know, we're kind of looking at the female game and the disabled game. So I'd like to hope, or I'd like to think that Capital Challenge 2022 will hold or will include some of those elements.
I'd like to come back to the idea of Skolars being a centre of excellence, and not just for semi-professional and professional rugby league, but university, schools, all that kind of thing. But one thing I wanted to talk to you about was identity. Does it harm you in any way, do you think, the name of the club? That clearly the Skolars element was an offshoot of the student game, and there was that tongue-in-cheek way of deliberately spelling Skolars wrong and attracting a sponsorship in the very early days from a certain lager brand. And that's one element. Do you need to look at that? The other thing is the word London. You know, in other sports, very few teams have been successful that have tried to have an over appeal, if you like. You know, even London Monarchs in the NFL, it didn't quite work, and there isn't a football team that carries London. It's the borough that it's attached to. Would you be better, I don't know, calling yourself the Haringey Hornets or whatever it might be?
Yeah, it's a valid point, and it's something that we've looked at. Certainly, the club was looking at rebranding 2 or 3 years ago. You know, there was some interest and some involvement to a certain extent from David Argyle from Toronto in kind of helping us to plan that. We kind of took the view, or the club at the time took the view that the name London Skolars had built up. Not a huge fan base, obviously, but had built up some fans and was a known name in the game. So there was a little bit of hesitation to remove that completely. I personally like the name Skolars. I think it's got legacy attached to it. But I do take your point about London. That is something, again, which we've thought about, and whether we kind of become more regional, North London Skolars, or as you say, Haringey Skolars, is a decision that we've got to really think about, and it's a very valid argument to do that. I think for the time being, we just want to get out and start playing the game again and start competing. You know, and everything that we as a board have been doing has been to that effect. So I think once we start getting out on the pitch, then we start thinking about the future of the club. But we do have plans for you know, trying to increase the visibility of the game, not just in Haringey, but across the city. And in the southeast, I think you know, the game deserves it. There's been a lot of emphasis on the transatlantic game, you know, and I think maybe we should have, you know, put a bit of that energy into promoting it, not just in London, but in the south in general. You know, because there are parts of the south that are big rugby areas that don't necessarily have to be union areas. You know, we can try and convert them to playing our game, or playing both games. You know, the both games are great games. I think certainly for me as a Londoner, not necessarily being brought up with rugby league, it frustrates me, the animosity between the codes. I get it, why some people feel the way they do on both sides, but it does frustrate me when essentially we're both playing the game of rugby, So I'd like to try and kind of breach that gap if possible. But I know I'm sure there's hundreds of people who've tried to do that before, but we can keep trying.
It's something we try to explain to people in Toronto, that you have the same frustrations, they can't understand it, and without the history and going into every single incident between the two codes, it's difficult to understand, I guess. You've mentioned Toronto and transatlantic investment in the sport. How did it all go down between yourselves and Toronto, and obviously a partnership which has come to an end now?
I mean, there was never an official partnership. They never bought into the club. They did offer us some marketing help. We spoke a lot to, or the previous administration, if you like, spoke a lot to David Argyle about potential tie-ups moving forwards, but there was never anything official signed, if you like, between us, other than they offered us some players and we took some marketing help that they offered us, and in return for playing at our grounds. They played 2 or 3 games, I think, over the space of 2 years. There's nothing more than that, really. I know there's a lot of speculation about what was going on, but there really wasn't much more to it than looking at potential tie-ups in the future.
And I mean, New River as a venue has changed, been upgraded at least a couple of times since I think the team first started playing there. And clearly there is potential there for it to be a centre of excellence in the north of the city. That's irrespective of whether the Broncos do move to Wimbledon or wherever they might happen to go. What do you think would be the best strategy? I mean, clearly you've already mentioned women and PDRL. There's the possibility, I think, Champion Schools has gone a little bit dormant. We mentioned that to Jermaine, and there's potential there. How would you look at a blueprint for London? There's a foundation that I think, again, has almost ceased operation now because of the strictures. You could host all of the community club finals days.
I
How do
think
you see it moving forward, and what sort of investment would it take, do you think?
From the investment point of view, that's a harder one to answer. I think strategy-wise, we need to create a forum of from in the southeast or in London. We want to create a clearly defined pathway. From juniors to the amateur clubs to us, and then potentially on to Broncos. And from there, obviously, you can filter out across the nation. But I think really we've got to build this from ground level. So our community coaches go into, haven't recently, but in the past have been going into local schools, really trying to get kids enthused about playing the game. And when we go into the schools, we don't necessarily differentiate at an early age the difference between union and league. We just want kids to enjoy playing rugby. As they evolve, then kids will decide for themselves which form of the game they prefer or whether they want to do both. But our aim is just to get the ball in hand and get the kids playing the game of rugby. So I think really important, start from the schools upwards, create a forum where the teams can come and talk to each other. As you guys obviously involved in Rugby League, probably aware that will probably happen in pubs around the city. But, there'll be lots of conversations in my mind about how we can really work together and create that pathway. And once we've got a plan, we need to really get out there and advertise it to the kids and to the clubs and just make them aware that, football isn't the only game in the city. That there is a viable alternative. one thing I've always thought in Wood Green, where we're based, is that it's a tough area. You know, it's a deprived area of London. There's a lot of tough kids out there looking for things to do. You know, if we can harness that energy and that toughness, if you like, onto a rugby pitch for 80 minutes, you know, I'm sure there are some hidden gems out there.
You mentioned the women's game. Do you think there's a case for maybe setting up one team that represents the south of England that should be promoted into the Women's Super League, just to raise the profile, to give the best of the talent down there the opportunity to play at the highest level? Do we need to make decisions like that, do you think, rather than say, let's have every team have a women's section? Let's get a representative of the region and get it up and running and out there and act as role models?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think we've tried in the past to set up Skolars ladies teams, and the big problem that we've faced is that they've got really no one to play. So, you know, that feeds in directly to what you're saying, in that if you haven't got a competition, there's no point in just having a Skolars team. So, yeah, we do need to think bigger than, you know, just a Skolars ladies team. So, you know, I think there have been discussions, I believe, in the past with either the Army and the Navy have ladies teams who look to play against other teams as opposed to constantly playing against each other. You know, and a few clubs that people have spoken to up in the north have expressed similar sentiments. You know, that they're kind of getting a bit sick of playing against the same teams and would like maybe a day trip down to London. So yeah, you know, I think that what you're suggesting is a very viable solution, because I don't think there's at this moment in time enough interest to kind of create a London league. So yeah, maybe it is a case of just putting a London team together, and obviously Skolars would like to be integral in that.
Oh, we look forward to welcoming you up to play the teams in the north in the near future, whenever that comes to fruition. How did you get involved in rugby league, Colin? What's your story?
Well, my dad's from Halifax, so you know, he's obviously been a mad rugby league fan, and he was actually my dad was the chairman prior to me, or prior to Adrian. So you know, from a very early age, I've been a Spurs supporter. I'm a football supporter, but every year I got taken to the Challenge Cup final with me and his mates. So it probably wasn't until my son started playing rugby, and he chose to play league rather than union, that I kind of got involved with Skolars. Initially, obviously, just as a parent watching his son playing at the under 11s. But then, you know, I found that it's a nice atmosphere at the club. It's a very family kind of atmosphere at the club. The supporters all know each other. And one of the things that I love about the sport in general is, you know, the lack of the I don't like using the word, the hooligan element that you get in football. You know, one thing I've always liked about rugby league, and that my dad taught me from an early age, is that, you know, you take the mickey out of opposing team supporters, you have a beer with them, you go your separate ways at the stadium, and then you meet up afterwards for a beer and a bit more mickey taking. You know, and that's how sport to me should be, and that's what I always tried to instill in my children in the sports that they play. That, you know, you take it seriously and you want to win, but you have to be graceful in defeat as well. And I think rugby, both codes of rugby are examples of how that should be.
At Spurs, then you've got Jose Mourinho, the special one, or whatever he's calling himself this week. How would you describe your coach, Jermaine Coleman? We've just been speaking to him. Fascinating man, speaks well about the game and everything else. How would you describe him as your coach?
Oh, he's fantastic. You know, he's been with us a long time as a player as well. So he's well known and well liked around the club. And, you know, his enthusiasm is fantastic for the game and for building a winning squad. You know, obviously there are times when that's at odds with with what the boards can afford to give him. But you'd expect no less from your coach. You know, they obviously want to get the best players and the best squad that they can, as do the boards, but we obviously have to manage the numbers. But yeah, we love his enthusiasm. He's a great asset to the club, has been in the past as a player and now as a coach. And, you know, the players all look up to him, especially the younger ones. And what we would like to do going forward is get Jermaine more involved with our younger teams as well, and getting more visible with the younger teams, you know, to give them something to aim for. And it's great that, you know, we've got, I think he's the only mixed race coach or black coach in the league, and our assistant as well, Ilias. So, you know, it's great that we have that. And that's very representative of the area that we're in as well. So it's, yeah, very pleased with Jermaine.
You talk a lot about time and strategy as well, and the fact that, you know, I think that the club has always been one to walk before it can run. You've never really gone down the route, even though you said a lot of players have come in from the heartland areas. You know, there's never been the huge expense on players that you know ultimately would come back and bite you. The likelihood is that you'll probably still be in League One next year. We wish you all the best in your promotion quest, but I think being realistic, you look at the ambitions of some of the clubs at the top end that put in applications to go into the Championship, and to make the playoffs would be a fantastic achievement for the Skolars. So the likelihood is you won't be a Championship team in 2022, but that's when effectively the money kind of runs out, and there's all this debate about what will the landscape of the sport look like, and how would that affect a club like the Skolars? I mean, would you be forced to effectively become a super community club? Would you still be able to stay semi-professional? What league would you expect to be in? An expanded Championship, or if there was no League One, how would all that work for you? I'm sure you've had discussions on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of thought going into how we can compete, how we can raise funds. You know, we're laying the groundwork to try and get more sponsors into the club, because, as you correctly say, you know, next season is going to be very difficult financially wise. So yeah, it's something that's always there in our thinking for the future of the club. It's difficult to say exactly how things are going to pan out, but we are looking at sponsorship. We're looking at different deals that will help us obviously be in a position to compete. And you know, if we can kind of piggyback onto the enthusiasm that's been shown in London around the World Cup. So, you know, the games, especially at the Arsenal grounds, you know, we need to try and harness that enthusiasm to build for the future. You know, and if we can start getting the interest in commercially from different ventures in the area, then, you know, I think that's key for us. So, you know, we are our commercial managers and our general manager, Charlie, is working very hard to try and lay the foundations for future investment in the club.
Do you think London needs to be regarded as a special case as well? And obviously you talked about closer relations with the Broncos, but does there need to be some kind of strategy from Red Hall or whoever is going to be in charge of the game to say that when we next have an opportunity to promote a club on a franchise type basis like Lee have done this time, London needs a consideration, but it's not the London club that is applying, it's the region and the area as a whole?
Yeah, I find it hard to understand the RFL's attitude towards London. You know, looking at it as an outsider for many years, and now obviously getting involved in it more, I don't really understand the apparent lack of interest in growing a game in London. So, you know, I think we do need to lobby the powers that be to try and, as you say, possibly make an exception for London, or do something to promote the game here. Help us in that way, because there's no reason that London shouldn't have, a much bigger showing in the game. I was disappointed that Broncos didn't get the Super League place. I thought, the season that they were in Super League, they'd done enough to show that they could hold their own there. I know that there was a lot of close results, but the performances that they put in, I thought were fantastic. And I'd like to see some of the energy that was put into building the game over in Canada and North America, put into expanding it in the southeast. And I really do hope that, obviously with Toronto and the fallout from that, and the setting up of this new Canadian league, that maybe the RFL and the powers that be can transfer some of that interest from there to the south.
We know people from the RFL listen to this programme, so here's the platform for you, Colin. What would you like them to do to help out the game in the south of England?
I think really it's a case of just awareness, just, really helping us to push the game in communities, giving us the funds and the access to facilities to be able to really give the game a good push, to attract the kids to start playing and to then come to watch the matches, to build up the next set of professional players. Ultimately, I would love for London Skolars to be 90% Londoners playing in there. But we are moving in that direction. But it's going to take time, but it's going to take investment. It's going to take investment and make the kids aware, make everyone aware that there is this game out there, that you can be getting involved in. Our area, Haringey, we're the only professional sports club on White Hart Lane. Spurs, Browne's on a different road. So, we could, you speak to people in Wood Green, in Haringey, they've got no idea that there's a professional rugby team round the corner from them. We go out as much as possible in the community and try and promote ourselves, but without the funding and without the backing of the RFL, it makes it very difficult. Our number one priority at the moment is getting the team out onto the pitch to be able to compete. We want to be able to do that. But also we want to promote the community game as well, because that's the future.
In terms of going back to this question of identity, and again, I think one of the downsides of the World Cup being so Northern powerhouse based is we've almost forgotten that the game is played in areas like yours, and the work that it does in the community is absolutely no different to the communities of Halifax, where clearly a lot of money is being channeled these days. But I think, going back to the question of identity, Tottenham Skolars has got a ring to it. I mean, would you consider opening sort of negotiations with Daniel Levy and saying, you've got the winter boxed off, but you need a summer sport, and we're already here, we're reaching an audience that perhaps you might want to reach. There's some synergies there, do you think? Yeah,
I mean, I believe it was something that a few years the club did approach Spurs. And I think, one of the things we've been thinking about is possibly setting up satellite clubs. So we were talking the other day about the potential of creating a satellite club around the Islington area to kind of coincide with the Arsenal Stadium. As much as it might pain me to have to go into the Arsenal Stadium, there's something I've got to do. But I think it does make sense.
You'd enjoy watching England and Jamaica there in the semi-final of the World Cup.
Oh, yeah. I can't, that would be a good one. But I think if we can work with the larger clubs, then there's obviously something that we could look at. Similarly with Union, it's always struck me that, we have different seasons. Is there any potential there to work with the Union clubs? I know a lot of the animosity and the differences are at the higher level, the players, and certainly at the junior level, kids just want to play rugby. certainly that's my experience of, watching my son. My son used to play at Saracens as well as Skolars, as do many of the Skolars youth team. So they just want to play rugby. And as they get older, they'll decide which one their body adapts to or they prefer. So I think there is mileage in talking to the union clubs as well as the football clubs. But yeah, we did speak to Spurs a while ago, and I think this year, we're certainly looking at how we can engage with Arsenal with the World Cup. So yeah. Well, I must admit, I wouldn't like to be called Arsenal Skolars.
That's why I didn't suggest that. I mean, the other area of the World Cup that will clearly be of interest to you is the wheelchair playing at the Copper Box. Yeah. Again, not your side of London, but clearly an opportunity there with the work that's been done on the South Coast with Medway and teams like that. Mm-hmm. Again, it's almost a low-hanging fruit at the moment for you.
Yes, yeah, and it is something that we really have to look at. I think our aim as Skolars is always to be a club that provides services to our local community, and certainly having a disabled or allowing for the disabled game to flourish should be something that we look at. One of the things that we talked about was walking rugby, which I believe is becoming quite popular. And I know we have quite a few players that play that touch. We have a regular weekly touch game, and you have quite a few older guys that would love to play walking rugby. Gets them outside, gets them keeping fit, but still got the ball in hands, and go for a pint afterwards. So it's something that we want to look at as providing a service to the community, whether that be wheelchair rugby, walking rugby, whatever it might be. I think we've got to follow all avenues. We're not going to be able to be successful in everything, but I think we do need to investigate what's viable in our facility and without the means that we have. So it's certainly something that we're looking into.
I feel walking rugby would still be too fast for my liking, but I might have to give it a go. There's no form of the game. I mean, it's the actual holding the ball and passing it I've got trouble with, let alone walking. Colin, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. It's much appreciated. We wish you all the best with the Skolars this season and going forward. You've obviously got plenty of great ideas and plans for the community, not just the men's first team, but the women's and PDRL and so on and so forth. And that's one thing we've noticed from speaking to clubs outside the Heartlands is they look at the whole of Rugby League, not just that men's first team. And I think it's inspiring for clubs up here as well.
Yeah, good. Well, it's good speaking to you guys. And
I think the message we'll take from it, from both yourself and Jermaine, is don't neglect us. That you've got a massive reservoir of everything down there, and if we continue to ignore it, then it's to our detriment, and as much to the sport rather than what you can achieve. And let's have some more support for the Skolars.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And it's been a pleasure speaking to you guys.
People have been missing biscuits, so just to throw a controversial opinion into the mix. Look, Jaffa cakes.
Hooray!
Are they cakes or are they biscuits?
Who cares? Just eat them. Have you had pineapple Jaffa cakes?
Haven't yet, but I shall seek them out.
I can recommend them in limited doses.
I mean, the listeners, the viewers will know that, because obviously the viewers can see them, but the listeners can't. Once I open a packet,
that's the problem. Yes,
like Pac-Man eating the dots.
No, I think you'll find that a modicum of putting them outside when you've had a couple of them is probably the best way.
Eat Jaffa cakes responsibly. They could be the new sponsor of Super League when they ban all the bookies. McVitie's Jaffa Cake Super League.
So are we excited that games will be played from this weekend, albeit friendly games, leading up into... there's a fixture chart you can put on your wall. I think we need ladders. Do you remember your two?
Yeah, the shoot league. No, I put some up in the Radio Yorkshire studios and then they got taken down.
We need ladders. There was nothing better than seeing your team move up and down a ladder and on spending a Monday morning changing all
moving them all around. I imagine though, as you know, as a publisher, they must be expensive to produce and put in magazines. So you have to make your own at home.
Yes,
Get
but
some cardboard, some sticky back plastic, and some tabs.
no, it's exciting. We're talking about what might be happening on the field.
I think just to reflect on our second interview there with the London Skolars and Colin Browne, their CEO, there seems to be they're very realistic about where they are on the field and where they want to grow, which is to have more Londoners in, which is good. But both he and Jermaine, who we spoke to, want more help from them at the RFL. So,
well, I think, again, everybody wants help in days where clearly you've got enough money to spread around, and it's harder to justify spending in any walk of life when your resource coming in is not as much as what you'd like to go out. So I get that. I just think that, you know, we mentioned on this programme a while ago that it was the 40th anniversary of Fulham starting. If you go back through the annals of the game, London, you know, figured in the very first ever test series. And so we've often tried to do something, but when have we defined what that something is and what resource it would need to do it? And I think that the pertinent point that both of them made was the idea of development officers, because they don't actually cost a huge amount in terms of, you know, if you're going to put in a whole infrastructure, that's different. But when we lost some money from Sport England specifically to employ development officers, the initial reaction was, well, we haven't got the money, therefore we don't have development officers. What we didn't say was we need to take an extra 3% off the Sky money to ensure that we can still have development officers. And if that means each individual club loses £10,000, but we're still retaining X number of development officers, particularly in an area like London and the South East, then, you know, we missed the opportunity to do that. It is an untapped area. The more you speak to people like Colin and Jermaine and everybody else who works so hard in the community game in London, has done over a long period of time, everything's there. You know, the players are there. They may not be playing rugby league at the moment, but there is a player pool there, and actually the cream rises relatively quickly to the top. I'm confident enough in our product that when people do try it, they enjoy it. They like the contact element of it, and it was absolutely telling what Colin was saying about, you know, the deprived area that the Skolars play in has got a lot of people who, you know, you could give them a real outlet in life, and that will involve the ability to tackle somebody and have contact. It's second nature to the character of people down there.
It's like they say about the boxing gyms, isn't it? Getting people off the streets and out of trouble. It's the same concept.
But you also need a structure. You need to be able to say, look, if you go to school and you have a taster and you like it, here's the club that's on your doorstep. If you go to the club that's on your doorstep and you really enjoy it, then there's a semi-professional avenue that you might want to go. And if you go to university, then again, there's southern universities that you know have a link now with rugby league or play in a competition that you could be part of. And actually, if you're good, you can then go into the semi-professional environment. But if you just want to support it, then there's a team on your doorstep. And then if you want to see it at a higher level, you know, the Broncos then are all part of this identity for the south of England. And we've got pockets that are doing really good work, but nobody ever seems to pull all that together. And we've missed that opportunity on a number of occasions. But there were two cries for help with people that are already doing it for themselves, saying, allow us to do it a bit more, give us the resource to do it. And you know, Wigan have seen it, but you know, what more do we need to do?
That's the question, isn't it? And there was something else Jermaine mentioned, which reminded me of a point when he was talking about the lack of mixed race and black players coming through at the moment and in generations past, and not asking questions as to why, but putting in processes to change them. But we almost need to. It just seems to be a rugby league thing where I'm not blaming the RFL on this. The clubs are as bad as it themselves. When something goes wrong, they look to fix it, but not ask why, so they can repeat the mistake in the future, which they always seem to do. We don't ask why. We don't ask why are these kids not playing rugby league anymore, because we know they did. because we know Jason Robinson exists. I've seen him. So where is he? Where's the new Jason Robinson? Where's the new Ellery Hanley or whatever?
Well, I was having a chat with Ben Thaler this week, who refereed that game in Bristol in the World Cup in 2013, and was absolutely blown away by how much of an experience it was for him. 8,500 people on a rainy, wet night. Virtually everybody he encountered was from that area around the southwest. He couldn't believe that we're still talking about what will we do in Bristol 8 years on, when we've allowed all of that to drift away, and that there has been talk of a Bristol team that never happened. There was an infrastructure there that we then decided we were going to put something on top of, that we've subsequently taken away, and it's almost as if we do things on a whim rather than on a strategy. And he was quite right. When we talk to Wales, people from Wales, North Wales and West Wales, the concept of a Celtic Crusader team that could have harnessed the best of everything at the highest level, and maybe even played one of its games in Bristol and stoked up that across the bridge rivalry. All of that it's not difficult to do if you've got a plan to measure it against. Whereas what we do is, on that given day when we chose to give out franchises, those two blokes weren't credible, so it just doesn't exist anymore, and you're always starting again. There's been another fantastic reaction to Code Breakers being on this weekend but everybody's saying, I never knew that story, and we now need to reevaluate exactly the contribution that Welsh people who were forced to go up north have made, and we're going, yeah, but how many opportunities do we have to actually cement the sport in Wales? And what did we do? Well, the top clubs stole the best Welsh players because they wanted to be better. And whenever there was a bump in the road, we just went, we can't really be bothered to overcome it. We'll just stop the car and get out, or point it in a different direction. And you look at you put up so many programs of Cardiff teams that played in 1996, and you look at the guys that were playing for them, and you would give anything now for players of that caliber and that rugby union background, who from a PR point of view were fantastic. And what did we do? We had them for half a year. They didn't win enough games. There wasn't sufficient strategy behind why we had them in the first place. We'll get rid of them then. And you just think, what we learn from listening to the guys at the Skolars is, don't let this happen in London, because it has on so many other occasions, and yet they're still enthusiastic about what they're doing and what they can offer, and it's a plea for help. We would be stupid not to listen to it.
By the time this goes out, there will be a programme which will have gone up of an A-team match at Bellevue from 1962 between Wakefield and Bradford, where the number 10s have two very famous names. Wakefield's number 10 is Samson, and Bradford Norman's number 10, Crabtree.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Wood.
If he wants to, he can come on the show, if he wants to. It's not open. We won't bill him, but we won't say he's coming on. He's welcome to come on if he wants to.
Well, he's been on before, and it was a very entertaining couple of hours, if I remember rightly, and changed some perceptions of people when he came on.
So I don't have much of a relationship with that club, but he can come on if he wants to. I might have some programs for him. I don't know.
I think in our next program we'll probably mention in more detail what is happening in Canada when we've got more detail of what is happening in Canada. But again, that's grassroots development, and clearly when you relate it to what we've heard from the two guys from the Skolars today, that clearly is a way of doing it. I still think there is a place for big splash, major team, franchise, well financed, big name players behind it, raising the profile at one level, but there's also got to be underpinning that infrastructure, and where the country itself is setting up a cooperative system where people can actually buy in. Now, I don't think we know fully enough how that's going to work and what it's going to cost, and is it going to be the existing clubs that are under the auspices of Canadian Rugby League joining a different league? We know it's going to be nines for 2022, 6 teams, 12 teams playing 13 aside in 20. But the fact that, again, this needs some support. if we're at a point whereby it can be announced, and there are sufficient people of influence behind it and finance, then what is the sport doing to say, right, what do you need? Do the IRL need to say, right, well, we'll go back to a test match between England and Australia, perhaps in Toronto or wherever it might be, that would help their development, and it won't be in a year or 2 years, it might be in 5 years, but there's a beacon for you to aim towards. And yeah, clearly it has to be the governing bodies of England and Australia buying, so you can't impose a fixture on them, but some of the things we do almost aside from the work that's going on in those areas rather than alongside it. And let's hope again that because interest has been triggered in Canada, that people have seen the potential of the sport that we love and are prepared to take it on. We should be supporting them, and I get exactly that same feel from Colin could not be more London if he tried. He whilst he might have the Halifax heritage, Jermaine has lived down there for 15 years. He isn't travelling down like Reg Bowden did on a game day and putting something on. He's invested in that community. He works in a school there. So what are we doing to support people like him? And I don't think there's a huge amount of cost. There's government money out there for deprived areas, for community-based projects. We're so good at all of that. Let's tap into it.
I mean, obviously, we haven't got the funding the NFL have got, but it was, I don't know if it was startling to hear the number of people who were involved in their training sessions, because I guess there's a massive, massive carrot at the end of that stick if you can achieve a dream of playing in the NFL, which, the odds of which are astronomically against doing so. But there isn't too much to change an athlete who's never played either sport before to remodel them to try and have a go at rugby league.
Well, if they've got 300 people turning up on a regular basis to trial, and on the law of averages, one of them gets to be taken over to an NFL team, that's 299 people that you should be saying, if you like what you've tried, if you were a defensive end, that little bit of contact, you want to try and do it without pads. We've got a ready-made supply of players, and one of the things we've all spoken a lot about is concerns about participation numbers, and how we're going to keep those up in unfamiliar territories and areas. Well, if you've got 300 people training at the same facility that Skolars play at that don't yet know rugby league, it's a phrase we've used 2 or 3 times. That's low-hanging fruit. We have to have a strategy to go out and get them, and if that means employing a development officer that's paid for externally, then for goodness sake, whatever that might cost, if you get 30 people that suddenly get imbued by rugby league and either want to play it with the Skolars or set up a new community team in Islington, or all buy season tickets, or want to buy a ticket to go and watch a World Cup semi-final at Arsenal, the money for that development officer gets repaid really easily and quickly, but you have to invest in the first place.
I mean, one of my wild ideas I've had in the past, because I read about it and I still agree with it, we should align ourselves more with the gridiron sports, because we have more in common with them, and just look at different places where we can develop our relationships. That was the point I was making
about the Skolars joining up with Tottenham. The one thing that football isn't great at the moment is appealing to the communities that originally supported it. So if you want to go and watch a Spurs game, it's the price of a holiday. Well, that's disenfranchising quite a lot of what you might call your core support from the traditional working class areas. Well, if you can ally yourself to say, well, we can bring those people through an offshoot called Tottenham Skolars, where they're going to get in for £5, but they or £10 or whatever it might be, but a season ticket holder that effectively is the equivalent thereof, but they get a half price match ticket at Spurs on a Wednesday night when they're not going to get a sellout crowd against Bournemouth, who I don't know who they play anymore.
Bournemouth got relegated, but see,
you know what I mean. United. There's work that you could do that would be mutually beneficial, and again, I don't think as a sport we've necessarily gone down those paths with maybe the strategy that would sell rugby league as being a bedfellow with a sport like Spurs. And if you have got, Jose Mourinho endorsing, a great Sunday afternoon in the summer is a barbecue down at, Wood Lane or wherever it might be. What's wrong with that? Why aren't we tapping into that? The special one at the special game. It makes perfect sense.
There'll be at least 2 or 3 people watching or listening to this who will know who the owners of the Jacksonville Jaguars, because not Jaguars, the American Jaguars, who also own Fulham and have their own wrestling promotion. So they're willing to throw money at anything. We should get the Khans involved. They'd love it. Get on to get Ralph on. Get Ralph on to have.
They'll only get involved if they know of it. Who's going to sell it? Somebody's got to get in front of them.
I'll send them
a clip of this program.
Send a clip of this program. What is to middle-aged people from the north of England talking about something?
So this is what you should invest in.
Yeah, Tony Khan. Congratulations on your awards. Come and invest in rugby league. You'll love it. Give me a job.
Maybe he would if he knew what it was.
Yeah, it's a job. It cost him a fraction of whatever he's spending on his other stuff. He's having 2 people fight this weekend in barbed wire that's going to explode. So he probably like rugby league.
Okay. Yeah, fine.
Probably costs more to set up exploding barbed wire than it does to fix some of our stadiums. But
if that's the way of the world, we can offer them the product, which we've always said we've got, but we can't market it as well as we would like.
Scott was spot on in his column this week in what's the singular of press, because we don't have a weekly trade press anymore because we've got one paper about clubs would rather spend money on journeyman. You can hear it in his own voice. Journeyman Aussies. But he's right, because I'd rather spend that 10 grand we could spend on a development officer or put a young kid in the team than signing someone from the Australian 3rd Division or whatever.
I think now's not the year to be worrying too much about young players being given an opportunity. There are young players going to be given their opportunity. Not only have we got 3 double weekends and trying to cram in a lot, I think there's going to be some judicious resting of senior players. There's going to have to be as well. There's going to be a toll to be taken, and I think more than ever, there's no money. Let's be honest either. That clubs are clearly don't know what their budget is going to be going forward, so they are going to invest in youth. It's at times like this that you do give them the opportunity, and I think now is not the time to be saying journeyman Aussies. I don't think we've got too many journeyman Aussies over this year. I think we've either got some really good Aussies, or no Aussies.
Here's something for our listeners and viewers to get involved with. I want your predictions on what is the highest squad number we'll see in Super League this year. Championship League one's going to be different because you get like people on loan, don't you? But in Super League, I think we are going to see numbers in the 50s, aren't we? Because we are going to see, we're already seeing players injured, and Jack Walker's got a squad number, he's out for the year. So someone has to add, Kyle Eastman's 33, so...
Yeah, I think it wouldn't be a surprise.
We'll give you a prize if you get the closest.
What did you get up to last year? I think.
I don't know. Someone will know, won't they?
Yeah. Well,
was Eddie Batty in the 40s at Wakefield?
40s, yeah, definitely. He was 41, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I think it probably could have been Wakefield that had used the most number of players last year.
I should really know that, shouldn't I? But
it sounded like a very good guess to me. I'm sure he was 41 when he came on.
Yeah. So if you want to have a guess at home, we'll find a price at the end of the day. I'll dig into my. Yeah, I'll dig into my. Oh, you can have me World Cup hat or Andy Farrell's annual, or there won't be Scully in somewhere with his hat. Oh, dropped it on the floor now. Destroyed me set. It's no good, is it? People expect professionalism these days from YouTube, and I've dropped everything. Nah. Now they can see it's just a duvet cover I put. I had my collection of quiz books, but yeah. So, is there any other news from the world of rugby league, Phil, that I've obviously forgotten about?
I think we've covered the big stories: the shock return of
Kyle
Eastman, the formation of a cooperative league in Canada.
You can't find David Fafita on Google. It's the other one.
No. Robert Elston is still with us.
Yeah.
I mean,
Phil Bentham's leaving.
Yes. I don't know what's happening with the referees department, but it seems to me that more people want to leave it than join it at the moment.
If I need someone to do some admin, I can go do that. I can, send referees.
Well, can you coach them? I mean, I think
can't coach
they're
them.
short coaches as well.
I mean, if I was in charge of refereeing assignments, then some people would put pressure on me to decide who would do Wakefield games and not. But as we know, the referees have a very hard job to do. I was a bit annoyed. James Child, he's famous now. I hope he doesn't go down the Nigel Owens route of being every bloody where.
Well, I think commendable. I think the way he handled the topic and himself, saying, I'm not coming out, I'm just now making it painfully obvious that if I get homophobic abuse, it's an offence. I think that, again, he handled that really well. And hopefully, anybody who does abuse him now will be pointed out when we do have crowds. The assumption is that there will be crowds. Will be pointed out and said, I'm sorry, but that's no longer acceptable. You know exactly what you're doing, and off with Steward, take this person away. So, yeah.
No tolerance for anything, any abuse.
Good man. That's not about whether people think he's a good referee or not, or whether he's ever done harm to their particular team's chances of winning a game. He's a good man.
I obviously didn't watch the Six Nations at the weekend because I was asleep or doing something else. I thought that their governing body, the hilariously titled World Rugby, threw their man under a bus there, whether he made a mistake or not, because you're not going to get coaches come out after a game. If a coach comes out after a game and blames a player for making a mistake, everyone rounds on the coach. I don't like this blaming the referees thing. I know they make errors, but everyone makes errors.
Yeah.
Phil has to look at my column every month and has to clean up the spelling.
You get to the point where if you think a game of rugby league is decided by one incident, you've lost the perspective of the game. That there will be 100 other occasions under your control that you haven't done as well as you could have done to lose that game. So it's the blame culture. We've said it before. I think we talked about that with Robert Hicks when he was on the show, and I'm sure somebody like him would come on again just to tell us how hard it is to be a referee. But it's not about that. It's about attracting the next generation. Why would you want to be a match official if the volley of abuse you get on social media? Well, I can go and fry a chicken instead or whatever.
Well, it's all right. The social media companies are going to sort it out, which is all right, isn't it? Because footballers, as I said, I think I said it a few weeks ago, when football moans about whatever Facebook and Twitter does when it does nothing themselves, when you see players circling referees and they don't do a single thing,
absolutely,
then of course, idiots on social media are going to do stuff because you don't patrol your own idiots.
Well, I think the other thing that came out of the chat with Ben and Robert, they were paying tribute to Billy Thompson, which you'll be able to read in the next issue of 4020 magazine out next week, contractually obliged to say that, is the fact that they can't referee in the way Billy did because the technology's changed. You are mic'd up. Everything is super close up. So, you're having a running battle with a player, or you're trying to cajole them into doing something that is going to aid the way the game is being played. It'll be broadcast. You can't do it. Everything you say and do is subject to absolutely minuscule dissection. So therefore, you just go about doing the job as best you can and getting off. And the rapport that Billy Thompson had with players of his era was absolutely legendary. And they were talking about that duality between Fred Lindop, who was, I'm a stickler for the rules. If you don't follow the rules, you'll be off. And Billy, who was, I saw what happened there. You can have one back, but that's all you're having. And it worked, but you could not referee that way in this day and age.
It's been like the NFL where they only turn the mic on when they want to, the referees. Or, because, we also miss Thierry Alibert going, move, all the time.
Nah, not that much.
Where are the French referees gone? Where have they gone? I'm going to put my hat on because just about finished.
It.
World Cup hat from the last World Cup over here.
I like it.
When I used to have long hair, I could have had it like this, but those days are long gone. Now I just got it on the top of my head because it's kind of like a modern day Bobby Charlton thing, just in case I can brush it forward. So he's not great for the listeners, but
I wish I had that option. Sadly, no more.
We are coming up on our anniversary, which is the 17th of March, when we'll have been on 7 years. Having listened to the first show, a bit of it the other day, because I was trying to work out when we were. God, it sounds like it's weird. It sounds weird. I think we started with a Leeds win on that as well.
It's safe to say that over the last 7 years, we've got more weird.
I think we've still got some listeners and viewers, which is good. And you know, as we always say, thank you for watching and listening.
We are very appreciative.
Please share it with all of your friends.
Please don't take anything we say seriously. Least of all, if you're a governing body.
Yeah. Hello to the RFL. Hopefully you've made it this far. People think there are two shows going on here. There's the show which everyone hears, and then there's the show some people hear. But
I think I'd like to think that everything we've ever said, even though we may have crossed the line and got it wrong, or it's always been constructive.
Yeah, and we were only joking about the Twitter. That was just a joke.
If you can't have a joke, then
we're not going to name it, but we like him.
You can't have a joke, then you may as well introduce Only Connect.
Oh, I tell you what, you know, it was interesting when Colin mentioned the animosity between the codes. As soon as I saw that fella with a Gloucester Rugby top on Monday, I was like, no, I want the other lot to win now. Not having it. No. I can't remember if they won or lost now, but...
No, I just think that whoever thinks the introductory and outgoing script is funny clearly needs to redefine the word. Like the show... Well, actually, I don't. The missus likes the show. I have to watch it. Humour is very much subjective.
It's very much for the yeah. It could be worse. It could be Gordon Ramsay's bank balance, which is dreadful.
Again,
no.
There's got to be more to life. And I'm a fan of Gordon's.
So... I'll have to put in a request to the RFL to get a referee on and see who they send us. And
don't get Ben, because I'm just editing out all these swear words at the moment.
Well, that's Wakefield people for you, isn't it? Normanton. They always call him the best Rugby League Ben from Normanton, apart from Ben Westwood.
He is a brilliant raconteur, and he's got a real feel for the history of refereeing, which is a lot more interesting than you think. But that you'd need a bleep machine.
Yeah, well, that's all right. We can do that. We'll try and sort that out. Try and work out who else we need to get on the show. We need to get someone Canadian on to talk about this Canadian thing. But
I think we know somebody.
Yeah, I feel we do. We might put her on Zoom so she only speaks for 40 minutes instead of 2 hours.
I think you control the mute button. That's all.
Phil, thank you for your time. I will get my copy over to you shortly.
We don't mean any of it, by the way. Please don't take us seriously.
No, it's all something. I don't know.
We are what we are.
Yeah, we are.
Right, I'm to go and get measured up for a Kyle Eastman shirt.
Which one of the Leeds' 7 shirts this year will you be getting?
I don't wear shirts, for goodness sake.
They always say it could be worse. It could be ice hockey, where they have a special shirt for everything. You know, at least Leeds have only got 4 shirts, I think, this year. I like the one with the rhinos on.
Well, there you go.
Special rhino. But I can't get it. But yeah, so we'll be back at some point in the future talking more Rugby League, because there's nothing else to talk about this week. So if we've missed something, apologies.
We'll get to it next time.
Thank you for tuning in to Rugby League's, I think, 5th highest trending podcast on Apple Podcasts. He says, if I could raise my eyebrow, then I would. But, one day we aim to be number 1. And when we're number 1, we'll give up.
We'll beat Brian Moore one day. Does he still do a podcast?
Yeah.
Is that above us?
Yeah, but that's the other lot, so they don't count.
Oh,
like on the rugby chart, it's about 27,000 rugby union podcasts, and then the 5 or 6 rugby league ones that exist. Apart from the Super Leagues one, which they haven't put into the rugby category, so it's not in there. If it was in there, that would be like the number 1 rugby league one. But because they haven't, then it's not. So if anyone at Super League's listening, The Super League listen to this?
I wouldn't have thought so.
Change your podcast thing. If I can do it for this, then then you can do it. Otherwise, enjoy the French Rugby League or something at the weekend.
We do.